Hello everybody, welcome. It's the 4th of July show. Yay. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. Ah, yes. Do away with the expensive fireworks and go digital. You can call in tonight at 709-589-4406. It's also the nuclear scientist suicide hotline. So if you're a nuclear scientist, you might want to take note of that. If you're gun jammed or your rope breaks when you're trying to commit suicide, we can help you by all means. 24-hour a day guaranteed service. Particularly if you're from the International Atomic Energy Agency, we can get a new gun to you in 6 hours. Okay, that's not true. It could take 7. Scientific experts believe Fukushima crisis is equivalent to 20 nuclear reactor cores exposed. Not exploded, but exposed. No, they exploded, all right. And now the interesting thing about this is a 16-day radioactive fallout map. And what's really a weird coincidence is whales and birds and animals have been dying right where the plume is, which covers the whole planet. There's been mass die-offs for quite a few years since Fukushima went boom. What have I got done today, I wonder? That's all good. It's all good. Tell the cat pees in your headphones. 46 dead whales right where the Fukushima plume went. Oh, that's right, then it went worldwide. Déjà vu. Now, they say they were probably there for a couple of days before they were discovered. We'll cover that in a second. More than 400 whales beached themselves in New Zealand. These are the same type of whales. So you're going to hear this argument that, oh, Dana, pilot whales do it all the time. The rest of the argument that they don't tell you is since Fukushima nuclear reactors melted down. That's okay. That's why we're here. Pick up the slack. The next day, another 200 whales stranded in New Zealand refloated themselves. There was a total of 600 whales. In other words, whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand because they're racist. And because now that pilot whales are committing suicide and nuclear scientists are not, I can only talk about the pilot whales, unfortunately, but there's also minke whales have been killing themselves at the same time in groups, which is unusual apparently. And gray whales are committing suicide from Mexico to Alaska. Humpback whales are committing suicide from Mexico to Alaska. Oh, and don't forget about the North Atlantic right whale. You guessed it, committing suicide from Mexico. This has actually gone worldwide now. Killer whales are emaciated and starving to death. 10 sperm whales committed suicide. They were all emaciated. Wonderful media didn't bother telling you that for about 6 days. They blamed it on everything, from tin cans to pop bottles to cardboard. And they were eventually forced to admit that the whales committed suicide because of no food, no squid. It's one of their biggest parts of their diet. Heartbroken again. And so the scumbag trolls are in the comments section on these stories. Oh yeah, no, they kill themselves all the time. It's totally normal. They have randomly throughout history been known to do it, but not all the time, all year long, year after year, sustained since Fukushima. There was a few incidences of it recorded. The species of the animals are said to be the dreaded pilot whale. We don't know what caused it, whether sickness. Like, whales don't get disoriented in the ocean, all right? Okay. They were expected to be there a few days. They were found July the 1st, but they figured they were there early. There was a significant number of other whales waiting to commit suicide, about 150 the full party would have been. So there's another 100 waiting to commit suicide, apparently. There was 15 washed up here last year in January, 800 kilometers away. We went and investigated it. The thyroids were cut out of all the whales. And we were getting hits on the Geiger counter that I left on the whale of 1,000 counts per minute. Totally normal, Dana. So you can see this is the exact same place. It's amazing, really. It's the exact same place where Fukushima radioactive plume covered. And Fukushima, France says it done it in 16 days. And Fukushima radioactive fallout is also known as global warming for those who live in denial. So that's pretty amazing. The whales died in the exact same places where Fukushima plume went. Surreal, isn't it? It's amazing. Overfishing, logging, and mining. And forest fires are to blame for the starving killer whale community. Starving. They got leukemia, is what's really going on. Let's go back to this story here. 2019, matriarch of the well-known orca family is starving to death. BC researchers are struggling to find their preferred pizzas, known as Chinook pizza. Actually, killer whales eat just about everything they can get their hands on. Normally, the best way to describe them would be as pigs, really, because they eat seabirds and squid and octopus, turtles, sharks, ray, of course, fish. Who would have figured that out on their own? They also eat most of marine mammals like seals and sea lions and porpoises and dolphins and sea otters and whales and bony fish, gluttons actually, and penguins. How can you eat a beautiful little penguin? Bastards. At 3 months old, she's the first baby orca born to the southern residents killer whale community since 2020. Should be 6 or 7 births a year. The author says she followed these orcas since 2018 story. I was on a research expedition in that same area at the same time on the ocean for 4 or 5 months straight. Within an hour after delivery, her baby had died. She carried the dead calf for 17 days and 1,610 or 11 kilometers. I'm not really sure. Actually, they followed it with satellites and helicopters and float planes and Coast Guard ships. Those that become pregnant miscarried 70% of the time since Fukushima. And the 30% that survived, the infant mortality rate is 40% of them. Which sounds about the same for grey whales and fin whales and mink whales and humpback whales and beak whales and this whale and that whale. A new study released this week by a Canadian university just It's like, what's the point? If it's from a university, it's like, what's the point? Orcas are not getting enough to eat. Wow, that's astute, eh? You sure they haven't got leukemia from all the Fukushima radioactive fallout? Turns out orcas are emaciated. They won't eat anything else. They're gone on a hunger strike, Dana. I should have said that in the beginning. I never thought about it. Thanks for telling me. An added strain, tankers carrying oil and timber create noise. All of a sudden now noise is an issue. There's much less noise on the ocean than there was for the last 40 or 50 years. Just saying it like it is. In the deep ocean, they rely on echolocation. So their brains then create a three-dimension view of the objects. Now they can't substantiate that conjecture. They're claiming that they're able to visually see a three-dimension of anything that their clicking noises are. That's simply not, they can't quantify those assertions, right? As they lose, I like this last part. As they lose weight, fat stored organic pollutants are released and cause damage to the immune and reproductive system, Dana. Not Fukushima, Dana. No, as they bioaccumulate radiation at a phenomenal rate, like the other whales, of course, and they show up emaciated because they can no longer uptake nutrition. You take the poor victims that they murder in the hospitals with chemo. No two chemos are the same, just like terracotta soldiers, apparently. They lose all their cells, all their hair. They can't eat anything. You can bring them pizzas and they're just going to say, no, I'm too busy dying. It's the same thing with these whales. Whales don't go on hunger strikes because they're bored, Dana. Like if you're starving and your preferred meal is one thing, what's the possibilities you're going to take a few nips of something else? Do they really think that the whole legacy is that it's absurd to suggest it really? They got leukemia from bioaccumulation. Head research, because salmon eat a lot of the heavy bioaccumulators. Head researchers sounding alarm over striking changes in the killer whales off Canada. And they used to say, well, the salmon are swimming through the radioactive plumes. Remember those early stories? They're going to get irradiated. No, they're going to bioaccumulate it like you can't. They're also going to do it that way, but they're going to bioaccumulate it. If they get caught in the original plume, they weren't getting out the other side. The story is from 2013. Striking changes in killer whales off Canada and Alaska since 2011. Unusual high mortality and odd behaviors. The crazies with their head in the sand fear something's wrong with the environment. Geez, you don't suppose it could have been Fukushima? Just saying. European windstorms. So they had an earthquake and he hit it away. Well, that's can't be good. Oh, there we are. Supposed to be on the pole, Dana. Where's the pole? Should the schools of mass destruction, aka pro-nuclear universities, be labeled as terrorists? We'll get to that coming up, of course. I got a pretty strong argument that the schools of mass destruction these are sleeper cells, and every year they take all these young terrorists known as students and turn them against humanity and the 8 million species. Pro-nuclear, obviously, we're talking about. Why are you so difficult? The magnitude 7.3 earthquake, which was an upper 6 in Japan's seismic intensity scale, is 7. That one. On March the 16th, 2022, is estimated to cause an insurance loss of 2.3 billion. Last year was over 5 billion, right? The one you had in March. All of these were in the exact same spot as the 2011 earthquake, by the way, these big ones. South Korea and Tokyo summit is needed to restore ties. So again, we see Tokyo, which this is the new norm for Tokyo. Well, you can't join the Trans-Pacific Partnership unless you radiate everybody in your supermarkets for the rest of their lives with Japan's lethal, disgusting, despicable food from the nuclear wasteland. They're crazy, eh? So the food wasn't just barred from Fukushima, it was barred from 14 prefectures. So the Seoul-Tokyo summit is strictly one-sided. It's blackmail, of course. Just, well, we're talking about Japan. What else could it possibly be, Dana? Citing Seoul's import ban from the Fukushima area on radiation exposure concerns. Like the way they always frame the narrative, it's so vague. The Korean participants, the Korean victims, also asked for support of Japanese business. Circle for Soul's push to join a major free trade agreement, a comprehensive, progressive, there's a joke, agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership involving 11 nations, 11 countries are going to go all out poisoning everybody in every community, in every supermarket with Japan's lethal, deadly, genocide, ecocide food. There's another study come out from the crazies. Hello to Dana's. Decade-old trends in cesium concentrations in bark and wood of trees. A scientific report. Ooh, a scientific report. Is it from university? Yeah. Oh, it doesn't mean much anymore, does it? And the bark and wood of trees contaminated. Concentration of gamma, because alpha and betas and neutrons have been banned from the conversation for decades. And wood potentially exceeds 1,000 becquerels a kilogram. Guess what, though? The permissible level in sub-European countries is 370 to 740 becquerels a kilogram, which means Europe is incredibly radioactive. That's some statement right there, folks. That's wow. The permissible level in some European countries, and the only thing they acknowledge was doing this was Chernobyl, which was a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of a percent of what Japan actually had. I'm sorry, it was probably a couple of percent of Japan's inventories that were lost. Japan also lost a common spent fuel pool in Reactor 6. So Reactor 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, and 5 spent fuel pools, and a common spent fuel pool. Bastards. Yeah, that's a staggering statement. The permissible levels in some European countries is, well, okay, hang on. I'll explain to you why it's actually like that. You'll like it. Hang around. It's cool. Do some trash talking while we're at it. Scumbags. Oh, what do I put in? CHERNOBYL. Pizza. Where are you to? Oh my God, look how many folders I got. I'm Chernobyl. How the hell am I supposed to find anything in particular? Yeah, we gotta do something about this. I got way too many Chernobyl. Holy shit, where are they all coming from? My God. Oh, okay, I know. Do this. It's literally scary to see Chernobyl folders. Just like, oh my God, did I really cover all of that over the years? I got one folder there with 1,800 studies on Chernobyl. I still haven't got to. I haven't told the story yet. Hang on. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Yeah, there you go. Half of my voice back that time. Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell the story. That's right. Hang on. Oh God, not this again. But this is the shortest way, unfortunately. Okay, so some European, the permissible level in some European countries is 370 to 740 becquerels a kilogram in your wood. You build a house out of that stuff. The last spot you want to be living in. Thanks, nuclear, you sack of shit. The influence of post-Chernobyl fallout on birth defects and abortion rates in Austria. Really? I thought Chernobyl was in a 30-mile exclusion zone, Mr. Daini. Apparently not. I also want you to think about, because this will come up later, trends in the human sex odds at birth in Europe. So they suggest in these studies, a lot of these studies, that the sex ratio of males to females was changed throughout Europe, all of Europe, by the way, and it's not just Europe, but all of Europe was changed to more males than females, which means less births. Which also, though, you can't have that without having the same attributes in all the insects and birds and animals, mammals, etc. throughout Europe. Prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Czech Republic. All those trees are going to be humming, I bet you. Secondary sex ratio trends in associated gender-specific births, males to female ratios, near nuclear facilities in France and Germany. So they're seeing all these discrepancies around nuclear power plants, where there's more males than females, and it stands out. Non-thyroid cancer in northern Ukraine. Well, your thyroid gets saturated after an accident sustained for many, many years, and you produce radioactive hormones, so are the insects and birds and animals and mammals. Congenital abnormality registry in Belarus. Fallout from Chernobyl accident, overall cancer incidence in Finland. So they're only acknowledging cancer from radioactive fallout when there's actually 1,800 illnesses and diseases and Down syndrome time clustering linked with Fukushima. Down syndrome is linked with Fukushima, or eating food from these places. So the scariest thing you can do this day and age is buy a bag of rice, because you're committing yourself to a massive bioaccumulation if it's coming from countries like Ukraine or UK, like around Sellafield, all those farms, or coming from Japan, for instance. Japan is the very last place you want to. You don't even want to chew on a pencil from Japan, let alone eat food from this disgusting parasite on our planet. Chernobyl fallout and prenatal mortality in England and Wales, which is true. It's true. They actually closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. You were supposed to abandon it because you can't drink the water, you can't breathe the air. If you're closing 9,000 farms and he did, because of radioactive fallout, you're supposed to abandon the country. That's right. That's the truth. That's the fact. The radiation is not flying around looking for the farms, okay? It's indiscriminate. I know that sounds crazy if you're from the nuclear industry, but it's actually indiscriminate. It's like snowfall. It's going to land everywhere. That includes your drinking supply. Because a lot of it continues to wash down for 1,000 years after. Chromosome aberration in a Norwegian reindeer because of, Chernobyl. 256 assessment of the influence of Chernobyl, birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. Estimated lifetime, I love studies like this here. Estimated lifetime effective dose to hunters and their families in the 3 most contaminated countries in Sweden. They're all contaminated, see? But the most contaminated. Geraldine Thomas, man, we want her in jail, 100%. She's a despicable, disgusting. What are we going to do if an alien race comes here and she's put on a pedestal? Then they're going to just zap the whole planet because they're going to find us worthless. Incidents of legal abortion in Sweden because of, Chernobyl. Ionizing radiation, human gender proportions at birth because of radiation. Legally induced abortions in Denmark after Chernobyl. Pregnancy outcome in Finland because of Chernobyl. Gee, they're doing a lot of studies on that, Daini, aren't they? Yeah, actually, that's true. Delayed effects of accidental radiation exposure, 15 years of follow-up after Chernobyl. Delayed effects, latent illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Pregnancy outcome in Norway, because Chernobyl. Early infant mortality in Western Germany, Chernobyl. Radioactive fallout, see? Trends in birth sex ratios in the vicinity of a research reactor in Germany. So, if these are very low wattage, we're going to be talking about one of them. Hopefully, I get to the story. You can't have a discrepancy, do studies for a sex ratio, unless the whole population is getting poisoned. That's the only reason you're going to do something like that. Because that's how it's going to show up, see? What a sad industry. Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximity to nuclear facilities in France. Again, these human sex ratio is suggesting the entire population is poisoned in order to find these discrepancies. Hanford, the There's a graveyard alongside of Hanford, one of many, with over 700 children with deformed heads. Chernobyl cover-up. They actually stole a lot of the documentation from Chernobyl. Actually stole it, disappeared it, and it is missing from the narrative. Radioactive fallout, neural tube defects for neonates and infants. Global implication of Chernobyl. Global. More males than females, Dana. Oh, okay. Just like after weapons testing, right? And the potential for disease initiation by inhaling beta-emitter nuclear particles. Now, it can't be just beta. It has to be alpha, neutrons, and gamma. They all get in your body. They're still pulsing energy at the speed of light, almost 186,000 miles a second, in your body. And then these hit each other, and because they don't mingle, they change direction. And just there's a constant X-rays in your body from the bioaccumulation of this ecocide machine, this omnicide machine, known as nuclear power. Potential for diseases, infant mortality. Look at all the people in those studies. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden. Effects of the accident in Chernobyl on the outcome of pregnancies. Dental abnormalities in people living in radionuclide contaminated region. Yeah, so if you go over by Crumbia or over by Donneray, you'll see a lot of people with deformed teeth, but the rest of the British were pretty good. Abnormal retinal pigment. So congenital eye defects is something we see a lot of over the years. Studies on that when it's concerning local poisoning. Leukemia incidents after iodine-131 exposures. Effects, and this must be huge doses, and which we had, unfortunately, worldwide after many of these major events. Effects of radiation in the reproductive system. Prenatal irradiation-induced brain and cognitive impairments. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. Now, why would you do a study on that? Because it changed the sex ratio of all species and humans worldwide, Dana. Great. So there's a lot of emphasis on males to females ratios because everybody gets poisoned, see? Instances of legal abortion, congenital abnormalities in Hungary, Down syndrome again, and schizophrenia in the aftermath of Chernobyl caused by radiation poisoning. Is that reassuring for everybody? So back to that study. That study right there. Kind of got off the beaten path for a few seconds there. Indirect, so they're talking about 3 types of direct contamination. Fallout shortly after from Fukushima, indirect contamination on the trees they're talking about. From directly contaminating the foliage in the bark, and then root uptake of the radionuclides. The bark consists of a directly contaminated outer bark. So these are wounds. These are what they call, they describe them as insults, right, to the tree itself. So they say the concentration was 10 times higher in the outer bark than the inner bark 2012. Because it takes a while, see? It gets there. And 137 concentrations, of course, this is not fair just to include a single isotope, because the average people don't understand there's another 1,000 isotopes in that same sample. And the whole bark decreased during 2011-2016 period at many study sites. mainly attributed to radioactive decay. Well, cesium decays to 50% of it decays to a different isotope every 30 odd years. Could be 35 years, could be 28 years, but somewhere in that period. And then they have a number, they'll just say 30. Blah. Now this model we've seen many times. This is where he claimed the Plume when he covered these sections. And look at the numbers that they're acknowledging again, are tiny numbers. Very, very, very tiny numbers. You stop that now, you old bad man doing the studies. I actually got a study where the Americans flew over Fukushima Prefecture with their planes at 1,000 feet, don't they? Let's find that one. She's pretty, study that one. Bring her over there, boys. I think it's right there. If it's not right there, it's right here. Oh, that's it. It's the short version. I want the short version. I don't know. Let's hope it's right here somewhere. Gonna make a lawyer out of me today. I appreciate that. I got no idea what I've done with it, folks. Oh, did I get lucky? I got lucky. Here we go. All right. New map of radioactive iodine released from Fukushima. So you can see this map looks pretty similar, don't it? Looks similar to the other one. That's the other one. That's so this model recorded a radiation survey conducted 1,000 feet above the ground by the Americans. April the 2nd and the 3rd, 2011. It was 1,000 feet above the ground. You already said that, Dana. Shows iodine levels at 3 million becquerels per square meter, 20 kilometers from the plant. So 3 million becquerels a square meter. Just wow. And that's what I mean. So wherever you find the cesium, you're going to find an absurd amount of curium isotopes also. They're the biggest byproducts of the radiated fuel rod, by the way. Ontario is leading the way in a new nuclear power. It's a weird story. There's some serious pandering right there. Yeah, you guessed it, politician. How could you tell? Todd Smith. Just call me Mr. Smith. The Ontario Provincial Energy Minister pushed to reduce carbon through the development of new made-in-Ontario technology from nuclear is catching on across Canada and beyond, said Shit for Brain. In 2021, General Electric, which should be tried for crimes against humanity, was named as a partner with the Canadian genocide machine known as Ontario Power Generation for their first small modular reactors at the Darlington nuclear site, because Darlington is being closed down. And they're going to have a new reactor in 2028. Did anybody tell them it's 2022 right now? They can't even get the environment impact studies done in 6 years, let alone build a reactor. In Canada, of all places. And these small modular reactors are producing 35 times more intermediate level waste, 30 times more high level waste, and 5 times more fuel rods. Because, they're inefficient. Saskatchewan is coming on board. This is just a pipe dream. This is posturing. It's 100% posturing. Alberta has signed a memorandum of understanding. It took a pledge to the devil, nuclear, a.k.a. the devil. Because if there is a devil, he's definitely pro-nuclear. Ontario is also working to provide the technology abroad in Poland. And poor old Tennessee. What has Tennessee ever done that deserved nuclear? Ontario currently has 15 nuclear disease factories in operation. Come on, man. You can't call it clean electricity. It's absurd. It's absurd. We see you go play inside the reactor, and then I'll think about it. Church stands against nuclear power in the Philippines because they're smart. In the Philippines, look at that. One of those buttons break, you kiss your planet goodbye. Renewables must double in the next few years, and you can. Piece of cake, it's easy. Worldwide, last year there was 333 full-size nuclear power plants where the renewables came online, 291 gigawatts. Try building 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months. It's absurd, right? Hang on here. I gotta find something to soothe my voice. There's gotta be a magic potion out there. Maybe if I get my whole throat tattooed on the inside. South Korea returns to nuclear power's warm embrace. Welcome back. We know you come back. What a creepy headline. Just think about somebody actually wrote that headline. Nuclear's warm embrace. Nothing screams Stockholm Syndrome like that headline right there. President Yoon is going all in on nuclear. Yeah, but he's only got a few years. The next president will just drop everything he was going to do. Like he done the moon, right? 100% posturing. You can't you can go all in on nuclear all you want. You can throw every penny your country got at it, and nuclear will just steal it. They're not capable of doing anything anymore. That generation was like 5 or 6 generations ago. That's why France hasn't built any reactors in the last 6, 7 decades, or anybody else. You know what I'm saying? There's been no renaissance. They went out the gate with 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, etc., etc. I disrespect these people. They'll show you this picture. But they won't show you that picture, surrounded by farms. Even though that's the same media. So South Korea returns to nuclear power. The next story. It will go all in to win orders for something that nobody wants. Why are these plants surrounded by farms all the time? Oh God, this is one of the funniest stories of the day. IAEA, which is 195 militaries. Should schools, I got a poll up tonight, should schools of mass destruction, also known as pro-nuclear universities, be labeled as terrorist? Is there something else we can label them as? I don't think there is it? That's about the only thing that actually makes sense. Somebody actually said no. That's so funny. You guys are funny. Somebody probably done that for a laugh. Nobody's foolish enough to say no. Oh my God, but this is common sense stuff. This is not difficult. Look at the twisted, sadistic coward. Raphael Grossi. He's got the perfect last name, doesn't he? Gross is also to visit the Australia, which is where it's illegal to have nuclear power legislatively, right? And technology organizations engage with Australian leaders in nuclear science and innovation during his visit. He must I shouldn't say it, I suppose, but he probably sleeps, never mind, I shouldn't say it. Be nice, Dana. Be nice. Fantasy nuclear-powered flying hotel in the Hiroshima is the Hiroshima of Hindenburg. But these guys are some hard cases. The flying nuclear hotel nobody wants. Nobody asked for. You got to give them credit for how stupid the industry actually is, that they even consider something like that. There's always something stupid around the corner. That's the problem with nuclear. Sizewell C environmental permit. And it just doesn't stop, right? It's like that all day. And you're like, I can't get any worse than this. And here's Sizewell C. Environment permits a new nuclear power station. Well, this is the new nuclear power station, surrounded by farms. That's what the new... If you don't do it, you can't get a job, see? If you don't draw up the designs, well, where's the richest farmland to? Okay, is there a nuclear plant there? No? Okay, well, we better put one there. Like, how else are we going to poison everybody if we don't put nuclear power plants? So it's really deceptive, right? Oh, the nuclear power plant, that's far away from our community. Yeah, we get all the food from there for our supermarkets, but it's far away from our community. The permits are to dispose of and discharge radioactive waste. Not even built in there. How do we poison the bastards? Well, Dana Wyoming has good intentions. They won't poison themselves. We don't do it. Who's going to do it, Dana? I hear you, man. Discharge cooling water and liquid effluents, which is radiation, into the North Sea. So they need permits. The two important permits are the discharge radiation into the North Sea and the discharge and dispose of. How do you discharge radioactive waste? It goes into the sea, Dana. Well, they actually have incinerators at these death factories on top of that. Ways to respond. I typically would recommend everybody respond. Go down and stand out in front of that place and give them to them. So, the engineers who designed this obviously should be arrested for attempted genocide, right? Well, if you design it in a farmland, then you should be immediately charged with sedition, attempted genocide, minimum, and you can probably get life in a loony bin, because obviously you're crazy to build a nuclear power plant in a farmland. The fuel pools are always splitting the atoms, for God's sakes. There's no way to grow food around these places that is not going to be 100% contaminated. Written reply on reprocessing of nuclear fuel for Indonesia? I can't remember. Singapore. Why did I say Indonesia? Got it on my mind, I guess. It is premature to decide whether Singapore should pursue spent fuel reprocessing, also known as MOX fuel. It's absurd to even suggest it. And the reason why I do it is because you can't store it anywhere. So they want to burn it and release it into the environment, because you can't destroy isotopes. They're forever, ever on our planet. You can't destroy them. See, Mother Nature has no way of destroying them, and we can't do it with chemicals. We will continue to work with academia and industrial experts to better understand the various fuel cycles and nuclear waste storage and disposal options. After 80 plus years, they are finally going to have a little look at it. That's pretty cool. This is hilarious. Locals are terrified. They finally used the nuclear sirens at their power plant. Were put there by activists, right? They finally, they said it was an accident. We know they must have had an event there. And somebody was like, well, I thought that's what they were for. We have an accident, we set the sirens off. No, idiot, that's there to make them complacent. Well, what he told me, my daddy was a nuclear scumbag, and his mommy was a nuclear scumbag, and her great-grandpappy was a nuclear scumbag. Locals were left panicking after Plymouth. We've covered this Plymouth site, I don't know how many times, probably 100 times in the last few years alone. Locals were left panicking after Plymouth's nuclear sirens were heard across the city. Now, they set these sirens... Wait, this is bizarre, by the way. They actually set their sirens off every morning at the same time for tests. These are freaking lunatics, boy. The sirens were sounded outside of the usual testing period, causing mass panic. Because it's just hours after the usual test is 11:30 a.m. every day. They test their nuclear emergency sirens. Even though they have major releases and accidents there, they've never used the sirens. It's a part of a robust safety plan. No, it's not. It was forced upon them by activists years ago, who brought it all the way to legislative chambers and turned into law. Plymouth MP, stupid Pollock, has reassured residents there is no emergency, but raised fears that the victims in the nuclear wasteland will not have confidence in the siren if it goes off outside of regular weekly tests. As a city, we need confidence that when the siren goes off outside of regular weekly tests, it is real. Many residents flooded to social media. That's what he done the stories. See? One said that the alarm had panicked quite a few people. That's very telling, right? Because they hear it every week, so What's that? Don't take them long before they realize it's from the nuclear power plant. Oh, that's the nuclear power plant siren going off. Why are all the dogs barking 11:29 every morning? Because the nuclear siren's going to go off at 11:30. Why are all the kids crying? Because the siren scares them. France turns to gas. France built all their shitty reactors at the same time. And then, because the government was involved in shitty welding, now everything is breaking down. Everything's been leaking for... France is disgusting. The La Hague reprocessing facility for mixed oxide has over 500 security guards, armed security guards. 500. 500. That's absurd, man. California budgets $75 million to keep the last San Onofre, the last nuclear plant operating, to avoid blackouts. Again, we've covered this over the last couple of years. So they purposely refused to fill in the gaps, the industry did. So you become dependent upon the degenerate, coward nuclear industry. So $75 million to a nuclear plant is an insult. They can't fix jack shit for less than a couple of $100 million. They literally can't do anything anyway. They have to bring in contractors. The state's last disease factory. The shutting of Diablo Canyon disease factory has been years in the making. Hundreds of millions of dollars are already committed for decommissioning. More than $2 million has been awarded to the University of New Mexico as part of a massive Department of Energy program that's pouring funding into nuclear power research to the University, the School of Mass Destruction, also known as the University of New Mexico. Over several years, we'll collaborate on another project will cost an estimated $4 million, with its work spread across several schools of mass destruction, also known as universities. Overall, over 40 schools of mass destructions, known as universities in the U.S., are getting handouts from the nuclear industry. So how do you stop this cycle of abuse? This is abuse, right? Because now your universities are not fit to go there because they have nuclear programs. It means, it's pretty easy, particularly for me, someone like myself, to make the case in just a couple of days that every university should be destroyed because these are school of mass destructions. But then what? How do we get people in education? And they can read the same books and then they can be evaluated. But it doesn't make sense sending our children to these schools of mass destruction where they're going to be weaponized against the species and the population. It's easy for me to make the legitimate case. Oh, God. If you're going to mention United Nations, I can't take you serious, okay? Who runs your country? Does United Nations run your country? Yeah, of course you do, Dana. Oh, okay. That's why George Bush calls them the New World Order, except I forgot to mention stuff like that. I think they're despicable. I think everything they've done throughout history is just incredibly despicable. And that these are incredible criminals. That this whole organization needs to be disbanded worldwide immediately. We got to bring back burning scumbags at the stake. Defines net zero. Who gives a frig what United Nations defines anything? Now, like, net zero wasn't defined by United Nations, by the way. It was defined by Miles Allen, a professor, a trader. Can I find that? Anytime you're ready, computer. Blurp, 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 blurp. I'll bring it up if I can ever find it. It's always got to be the opposite way I go. Oh my goodness, I'm almost there. Yeah, it was Miles Allen. Was the father of net zero. Professor Miles Allen, the physicist behind net zero. Oh, by the way, I'll have my Enrico Fermi target practice for sale soon, hopefully. They're free to nuclear students if they want to get good target practice. And we're going to have pictures of Enrico Fermi with a bullseye in the center of his head. UNM has several unique technologies on campus that allows researchers to do the projects, including a small nuclear reactor. I showed you earlier these research reactors release so much radiation they change the sex ratio in the surrounding community. I think this is obviously a major nest of pro-nuclear and a school of mass destruction on a whole different level. They actually got their own reactor. So those types of institutions should be leveled and disbanded, and that professors should be sent to Fukushima for reparation. It's just terrifying that they got their own reactor. So Chen says the new reactors will be 1 to 20 megawatts of power. They'll be smaller, cheaper. You can build them in factories and throw them in the back of a pickup truck. And ultimately, what you come to realize is these are kooky as they get. These are whack jobs. And it's all this posturing are stopping us from coming up with solutions. If you took these same crazies and put them to work on solving the renewables, they would screw it beyond repair. You would never be able to fix it ever. So send them to Fukushima. Send them into reactor 3 and 4 and get rid of them. You know, they can bring a shovel with them, do a few things before they die, but they're not necessary on this new world order that we created where nuclear is no longer welcomed. Or the Department of Energy. And the Department of Energy awards are primarily research development projects. In other words, you don't need to come up with results, just take the money. Don't forget to kick back the money at my pool party next Sunday. These awards are an investment in both the next generation of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear biological weapon fallout. Radiation fallout is a biological weapon, right? Next generation of scumbag scientists and degenerate engineers who are going to design nuclear plants and farmlands. This is terrorism. Nuclear is terrorism. Terrorists. Nuclear terrorists account for about 8% of the U.S. primary energy consumption in 2021. Which shows you how pathetic the American Department of Energy actually is. Oh, God. The IAEA, the idiot equals idiot, assesses aging management of Dutch research reactors. So I'd like to show you this pretty reactor right there. It actually looks like that. Look at the pretty farmlands all around the nuclear medical facility, nuclear waste hemorrhaging into it all the time. IAEA. They got their fingers in everything. They're truly the atomic plague, is the IAEA. A team of 7 international disease promoting scumbags have visited the high flux reactor. So this reactor is old and decrepit and it's brittle from neutron bombardment. On behalf of the fictional, it's not the International Atomic Energy Agency, it's on behalf of the United Nations, because that's who runs that. To examine the way in which operator, now the operator is the Nuclear Research and Consultancy Group, also known as NRG. They also run a research reactor. And they, 2019, they received funding for nuclear medicine, and this is their site, nuclear site surrounded by farms. It's terrifying, isn't it? All we see is this evilness. But like the thing about nuclear, it's always over the top evilness. It's always like, oh yeah, well we can wreck the planet too. The non-regulatory agency known as IAEA concluded that the NRG is in line with the IAEA standards. And so why does the whole world have to get down on one knee and kiss the rings of the IAEA? Because they're the head of the mob, the nuke-tart mob. The mission found NRG had a clear commitment and dedication to safety. Really? The implementations of 10-year safety evaluations at the site. And based on the IAEA safety standards, the IAEA team, the IAEA team, said it's pleased with the IAEA's positive feedback. The 45 megawatt high flux reactor started operating in September 1960. So this is a very, very, very old, decrepit reactor. Back then, its uses were for nuclear material testing, fundamental research, the production of medical isotopes. There's no such thing as medical isotopes. That you can't do better with something else, by the way. And that the medical, like chemo and stuff like that, that's crimes against humanity to give people, to inject them with radiation. It's truly, we've lost our way. We've lost all common sense by murdering everybody in the hospitals with man-made anthropogenic radiation. Really, like, you know, every country kills billions of animals trying to make this, allegedly trying to make this concoction that'll stop cancer. DCA is known to stop cancer flat in its tracks. Despite the industry took over that narrative and claims the opposite, the original studies clearly showed DCA worked 100% of the time after about 3 months of continuous use. Had no adverse side effects, no toxicity. Supplied about 60% of Europe's alleged medical the victims are injected with this. They're kept in rooms. They're lead lined, what they call $1 million rooms, and to protect the people in the hallway from them emitting so much radiation. See, and that their urine and their excrements goes into a separate sewage system that is collected and brought to nuclear waste sites. Even their spit is contaminated with man-made anthropogenic radiation. Some 30,000 victims every day are assaulted with isotopes from the Netherlands. The Dutch gave its approval in 2012 for the construction of a replacement for the new reactors known as Palace is expected to begin operating around 2024. In other words, they're just going to, the genocide is never going to stop with this lot, right? The genocide machine has never had resistance. We're the first true resistance educational program to exist, and we've paid a horrible price for it, obviously. Integration of a Wigner effect-based energy storage system with an advanced nuclear reactor. They're going to use neutrons to bombard material because it captures the neutrons, and now it's like fuel rods, but not as powerful, right? But it produces energy consistently. This is what we call, which is why 90% of a nuclear site is radioactive, is from the neutron bombardment. And we've seen them come by here sometimes where they say, no, radiation doesn't contaminate other objects. That's all it seems to do worldwide, by the way. It contaminates everything. Has been studied for decades, and they're well aware of these attributes. Recently, storing energy through the purposeful creation of defects in crystalline material via heavy particle bombardment. So they're going to make nuclear waste and call it a battery, folks. Is what that study's about. Nothing says crazy quite like nuclear. The greenhouse gas emissions of a nuclear energy life cycle assessment of a European pressured reactor. United Kingdom study. Because this is 2021 study, I think. Yeah, 2021 study. The results are higher than generally accepted figures for nuclear energy, for greenhouse gas emissions. That didn't stop them from lying, though, of course. Different views exist on carbon intensity and sustainability. No, like facts are facts. Views are not facts, okay? So next time you do a study, leave opinions and conjectures out of it. Thank you very much. Assessment of radiation pollution from nuclear power plant. Good luck. They split uranium atoms in a process called fission. In a nuclear power plant, heat is generated to produce steam that spins a turbine to generate electricity by splitting atoms. But the atoms never go away. So eventually we take the fuel out and put it in a pool. It's hemorrhaging, splitting atoms all day into the environment. And if the environment is surrounded by farms, guess what happens to the people that's eating that food? And the majority of nuclear plants are surrounded by farms. As far as you can see, too. This was 2021. July the 7th, 2021. I didn't see this one. This was the Daini plant. We actually didn't cover this story. We apologize to the media for not covering the story. So TEPCO grants the first peak at work to scrap Fukushima No. 2 plant. Well, wait till you get a load of this. Armed with protective gear. Well, look. These scrawny, skinny little materials they're wearing are not protective gear. They're using a pressure washer. To decontaminate something with radiation. They must be nuclear students, Dana. No. It's going to take around 44 years. TEPCO also owns the Daini. Has not secured a location to get rid of the radiation. TEPCO, which is not a decommissioning authority at all. It should be the nuclear industry. It should be nuclear universities. It should be the School of Mass Destructions that created it in the first place. The project is expected to prove an enormous challenge to TEPCO. Yeah, because TEPCO don't know what the frig it's doing. TEPCO actually doesn't even exist anymore. On top of that, it was nationalized immediately because it went bankrupt right away. Together, 10 reactors are housed at the 2 plants, 4 at the No. 2 and 6 at the No. 1 Daiichi. The company will train workers for the decommissioning. Why not use nuclear scientists and nuclear academics who already know what they're doing? And TEPCO couldn't train anybody if they tried. They're incompetent as they get. They got a secure workforce. Well, I thought we had all kinds of nuclear universities, nuclear companies, and all kinds of weird, funny, brave heroes in the nuclear industry. Okay, I know that's ridiculous, but for the lengthy projects that will span decades, put measures in place to ensure the safety of the facility when hit by natural disasters. Well, over decades, there's going to be lots of typhoons, lots of earthquakes, and more tsunamis. On July 6, reporters were granted access. There's a joke. The Fukushima Daini plant, the No. 2 plant, so they could show their work to the public for the first time since the process began on June the 23rd of this year. The work on July the 6th revolved around decontamination. So they expect the next 10 to 14 years to be due decontamination. There's 4 stages. The first stage, donning protective gear, which is a rain suit, is now protective gear at a nuclear meltdown, is it? It's probably better than the paper suits, Dana. It's true, you got me on that one. 12 workers from TEPCO and contractors cleaned up pipes around the water tanks with a high-pressure washer in a room for inspected equipment that inserts and removes control rods from the reactor core. Like, you can't decontaminate those pieces of equipment with a pressure washer. You kooky, despicable nobodies on this planet in the nuclear industry. You friggin' weirdos. The work to decommission No. 2 plant will be divided into 4 stages. Each stage spanning a decade or so, 10 to 14 years. According to the nationalized company called TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority, and has a legacy of nothing but an atrocious behavior. In the first stage, operators will focus on decontamination the facility to prepare for the following stages. So the first stage is 10 to 14 years of decontamination. Wow. Holy shit, eh? That is messed up news, folks. And the first stage operators, I got to put that in my pile now because that'll disappear if I don't. Hang on. Oh, man. I'll try to remember later. Oh, yeah. Nothing screams lunatic like nuclear. Really, right? Nothing screams lunatic like nuclear. There you go, I got that secured. We can find it again when we talk about the Daini plant. I can't guarantee I'll find it because smoke from Fukushima Daiichi 3. Smoke from Daiichi 3. Fukushima Daini. The Fukushima Daini plant then dramatically jumped from 20 millisieverts to 80 millisieverts after smoke was seen at reactor 3. It's only 10 miles away. Could the China syndrome reach that far? Absolutely. Who knows? Partial meltdown. So this was March the 14th. This is 3 days after the earthquake and tsunami. Partial meltdown led to hydrogen explosions. Partial meltdown is what causes well, there's no such thing as a partial meltdown. With these reactors, they were 100% meltdowns. And the people who wrote the article knew that too, by the way. They downplayed the living shit out of it. It's just terrible that people like that are allowed to do that. It shows you that, you know, we have an issue that needs to be resolved. So the fuel melts down, and that liberates the hydrogen from the cladding, and that causes the build-up, and then you need to just introduce oxygen or a spark, and it'll detonate. And this is what happens. And even though they admit that they had an explosion, on Monday and Tuesday, sound like an explosion was heard near the suppression pool of reactor 2. No, it was like if you know, near the pool of reactor 2, because later on, they claim ignore the other reactors. There's an explosion that ripped the roof off reactor number 1 and another at reactor 3. And on March the 14th, that injured 11. That was the mixed oxide fuel facility. Hang on, because that's important. This was the pictures of the explosion was seen widely online when this happened, right? There's no way they missed that because these are nuclear experts and physicists, right? So reactor, I'll just show you 2 of the 4 reactors we regularly talk about, even though there's 2 more. So this was what the buildings looked like when they wrote the article, and they knew that. And there was no illusions that the remains of these 190-foot buildings, there was nothing intact now. They had lost their inventories, decades, reactor cores in the fuel pools, and everything else. The culprit in all 3 explosions was likely a buildup of hydrogen, like happened at 3 Mile Island as a result of the partial meltdown, he called it, was it? Again? I dare they call it the meltdown. Caused by nuclear fuel rods experience extremely high temperatures, stripping the hydrogen of the plant's steam. To control, because the rods just keep heating if you can't cool them. And then they ignite. And they'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Which is pretty loud, isn't it? The byproducts of that continue to split. So it keeps splitting the atom over and over and over, even though you so-called shut off the so-called chain reaction. You take the rods out and put them in a pool, they're still splitting the atom, and they still generate heat. So these invisible plumes that cover the planet are full of gamma, alpha, neutrons, betas. They're still splitting the atoms, some of this. And the plumes themselves, of course, are pulsing energy from the upper troposphere to the bottom floor of the ocean. The explosions of reactor number 1 and 3, so they left number 2 out, destroyed the surrounding buildings, but have apparently not damaged the massive steel containment vessels as much as 20 centimeters thick that surround each reactor core. The explosion of reactor 2 is potentially more serious, as it seems to have affected pressure in the suppression pool. So, that's reactor 2. Now, if this just happens, you have reactor 2 had an event, but then there's reactor 3 and 4. So are you going to say reactor 2 looks worse, or are you going to say reactor 3 and 4 looks worse? So does this look worse, or does that look worse? So this is reactor 2, the remains of it. It burned continuously for several days. So it's completely gone China syndrome. That's the remains of reactor 3, the mixed oxide facility. So which looks worse to us? Ignore the fact that both of these are the official pictures, and that CBS Seth Dorn is a senator's son who is selling out humanity and 8 million species for a paycheck. So now they switch gears and try to get you thinking about reactor 2, because reactor 2 looks like that. But don't show you pictures and don't describe reactor 3, which they are well aware of at that stage. Claiming that reactor 2 is potentially more serious, it disarms the population from coming up with solutions. It's a crime. It's a 100% crime. So you focus your attention on a building that's not physically looking destroyed. Radioactive materials might escape versus radioactive materials definitely escaped. So the whole story was predicated upon deception in the first place. He's a contributing editor at Scientific America and hoping to be a human one day, but he doesn't have high hopes. His compadre at the same media done the same thing. Now, this was March the 12th. He gets a bit of a leeway because it's the very next day. But again, they wrote the story in a way that admonishes anybody who has concern, that belittles anybody with legitimate concerns on top of that. and claims the explosion of the reactor's housing structure. He's talking about reactor 1. That detonation was massive, man. Analysts the loss of cooling, severe accident scenario, spent fuel pools. The Fukushima disaster in 11 of March 2011 showed the safe storage of spent fuel assemblies in the spent fuel pool is very vital, since many radioactive fission products could be simply released into the environment if a severe accident occurred in the equipment. So they're claiming in that study that the fuel pool wasn't damaged. I know, right? It's crazy, isn't it? Well, here's the remains of Reactor 3. The fuel pools were at the top of a 190-foot building. Guess what? It's no 190-foot building left. It's completely lost everything. Oh, and the building alongside the Reactor 4 has the fuel pools will be at the very top of the building, and the reactor cores, they're gone for sure. Decades of reactor cores are gone. And there's no integrity to the building whatsoever. I actually had people argue with me. They ignore all the damage and destruction and everything else and focus on some ninny facet. This was a Canadian nonsense study to justify more nuclear. But they were talking about loss of cooling accident for a typical spent fuel pool during the refurbishment process, which is now happening. Significant concerns after Fukushima disaster raised on the potential radioactive releases from spent fuel pool accidents. When a full core is added into the spent fuel pool, a shorter time than normal refueling discharge, a prolonged continuous loss of cooling is postulated in order to boil and evaporate the water. All fuel pools go through at least 120 liters a day. They boil off, and each liter is saturated with 1 trillion isotopes that drift around the planet looking for victims, or even worse, ends up in the farms they're surrounding them, these disease factories with. Again, the wet storage period is 7 to 10 years, they claim. There's lots of fuel sitting there for 30, 40 years. Sellafields have been sitting in fuel pools for 40 years, 50 years. Hemorrhaging radiation to all the farms surrounding Sellafield. When you're going through these studies, when you can find stuff that actually gives you some documentation, because a lot of it's behind paywalls, but a lot of it's not. And if you're familiar with the topic, you can extrapolate a sick amount of information from just abstract itself, right? So he simulated, he simulated ground disposition of cesium, again, just gamma. Because what they'll do is they'll extrapolate alpha, betas, neutrons, and 1,000 isotopes from that. Ooh. Oh, yes. This, I think I said the other day was my front driver's side. I thought it was too when I said it, obviously. It's the front passenger side. I jacked it up this afternoon.
July the 4th.
July the 4th.
That's the bearing right there. Look at that.
You can't, I don't know if you can see the brake actually shaking there. That's gone, man.
Should have zero movement, eh? So that's the bearing. James donated 185.
Right, James donated exactly what we need. It was 185. I think it's 179 actually. And I'll go and order, put the money on the card and order that tomorrow because James donated. I went down and checked out a few places today. The cheapest I found the bearing for locally was around 350, tax included. That was at 3 different places. Hard cases, eh? So Amazon will ship in for shipping included, taxes included, was 179, I think it was. Well, when you finally punch it in and say pay, let's hope. I'll check it again tomorrow before I go and put the money on the card so I can order it, right? It'll be here by the middle of the month, I think, by the sounds of it. And that comes with the speedometer cables too attached. I'm still going to have to buy a 35 millimeter socket to get the wheel off, and I got to find an air hammer gun. Anyway, they're really cheap, like 50, 60 bucks. But that's the only way to get it out, right? You need an air hammer to torque it out of. And then when you go to put the new one on, you just use the impact, the air gun impact to suck it in with the torque those things got, right? But to actually get it out, you have to use an air hammer. I've seen people hit it for like 2 hours straight with 6-pound sledgehammers, trying to get the shaft to come loose. We'll get her, and that's a huge deal. And I didn't realize it was quite that bad. It didn't seem that bad the other day. That's pretty bad, and so I can still use it. Meanwhile, but it's making a lot of noise now, right? It's the passenger side, which confused me. So I'm pretty grateful for that, James. Thank you. That's a big deal. Hi, Marjorie. I hope you're doing well. That's it for me tonight. Trying to save my voice here. Seems to be working and getting a bit better the last couple of shows, right? Last show and this show. As soon as I recognize that my voice is not working the way I'm hoping, I'll turn the volume down and hack my guts here for a second. And that helps. It improves it a bit. Richard. And everybody. Kevin Blanche. Good night, everybody. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Fire tankers. You got another force fire down there, Dana. Wow. Patrick. I hope everybody had a great day and great day tomorrow. Thinker. Obsolete Optics is out there. Colette is out there. Hi, Colette. Swanee D is out there. Hopefully Stephen Young is out there somewhere. And I can't remember everybody, unfortunately. And I usually just talk about people in the comments section. Quick shout out to people, but got a tendency to include people that I happen to know will be watching too, because why not? James Lucid again. Thank you, James. You're awesome, man. That's a big deal. Get that another issue dealt with. So, yeah, it's a stressful year this year, I noticed, for me. But the stress is getting removed constantly, so I'm pretty impressed. That mole has shrunk again. I was going to do it again right now when the show's over. I'll give it another treatment. I do it every 24 hours, right? So that's pretty cool, pretty impressive. That's a good start when you're taking DCA to see stuff like that. And with the mole, I'm putting DCA mixed equal parts with water and a Q-tip and putting it directly on the mole. The mole has shrunk 3/5 of what it was in just 4 days. There's nothing else can do that to a mole that we know of. It just flakes apart. Yeah, so obsolete optics was there. Look at that. See, I was thinking about you, man. And I'm just trying to be light humor. Let's come over and check out the poll before we call it a night. There's the poll. Say goodnight, Mr. Poll. We get censored pretty heavy tonight, did we? Wow. Should schools of mass destruction, also known as pro-nuclear universities, disease factories, be labeled as terrorist? Well, a couple of people actually voted no. What the hell, man? Well, how can you describe them as anything else but schools of mass destruction? How does that work? So what a university is whether you agree or not, it's fact. We can back that up with documentation, can't we? Yeah, those bearings are crazy. I guarantee a piece where the DCA is helping for sure. It looks like we got everybody, do we? Yeah, Dana, where Dana's too, Dana and Asana, they've had some serious forest fires last year, man. Holy. That was scary. Timber, Traveler, you're not invisible, I can see you. If I can see you, Timber, you're not invisible. If I can see you, you're not invisible, okay? It might feel like you're invisible, but I can see you. Or is it invincible? There you go. Yeah, I usually shout you out if I see you. If I read it later, then... if you only comment once, I can... sometimes I notice I can miss people. If I'm scrolling through a big list, right? But at the end of it... it's all good. It's too bad everybody hasn't got as thick a skin as I got, is all I can say. My skin's like a dinosaur now at this stage. A couple of mass murderers to wave goodnight to everybody. You gotta be some super kind of evil to do what they done at the G7. That's a whole different level of evil, man. That was really something. How did we do tonight anyway? 32 likes. Censorship and desperation, eh? But see, the nuclear, people who listen to nuclear, they're as hardcore as you get, so they're not going to be swayed by censorship. I've been around too long. I don't lie. I don't misrepresent anything. I don't make anything up. I'm doing this for the right reasons. And I'm something the nuclear industry can never be. I'm actually a good person. That's something everybody in the nuclear industry immediately recognizes and despises me because they can never be a good person. You can't have both. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody. Thanks, Darlene. We'll see everybody tomorrow night, and if not, it'll be there when you get around to it. Take care, folks. Michael Allport.